Good evening. It's just gone 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, 2020, the 24th of December. How are you doing? My name is Toby Lapati Mesme, and this is another episode of MesmePolitics. That's right, we're going right through the festive period with all your updates. If you've never heard the show before, we're live at 7 o'clock every night, Greenwich Mean Time, bringing you half an hour of the latest in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. There's no other outlet quite like it. Let's get stuck in. So what's on the show today? Well, up around the end of the show, we're going to be talking about the public backlash against the government in the wake of Christmas being cancelled, Tier 4 being a thing, and general pandemonium regarding the coronavirus response. Labour has secured themselves a 4-point lead in national polling, according to YouGov. A tremendous turnaround in the space of a week. Will it hold? What does it mean? Is it a red herring? Do we just ignore it? What should we think? Is this a win for Starmer? Is this a loss for Johnson? All of that and more we will be talking about. All your in-depth polling analysis coming up. Over in the US, I want to talk to you about Trump's excessive pardons and the systemic power failures that they lay bare. I want to talk to you about what cowards the GOP are being, defying Trump on an issue surely we can all agree on: $2,000 stimulus checks. No, apparently not. Even Trump's on board, but House Republicans not so much. And in the midst of all of this as well, let's hear the contrast in Christmas messages from the outgoing President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the President-elect Joe Biden. Now, at the top of the hour, a Brexit deal has been signed. On Christmas Eve, it's going through. Parliament will be recalled. The EU is setting in place whatever provisions need to be set in place to get it over the line, but no deal is not happening. Those that said, this was all a bluff were right. The deal's been signed. Concessions have been made. Johnson will now trumpet this as a great triumph. How much of a triumph it actually is, of course, remains to be seen, but we'll be talking all about the Brexit deal, Labour's response, and the implications for the UK economy, UK politics, EU politics. What does it all mean, and what should the left make of this? Let's dive right in, shall we? So, first of all, Boris Johnson was speaking earlier upon signing the deal. He's got Brexit done, the crown achievement of his government, basically. This is the whole reason he has an 80-seat majority. Let's see what he had to say.
So I'm very pleased to tell you this afternoon that we have completed the biggest trade deal yet, worth £660 billion a year, a comprehensive Canada-style free trade deal between the UK and the EU, a deal that will protect jobs across this country, a deal that will allow goods, UK goods and components to be sold without tariffs and without quotas in the EU market, a deal which will, if anything, allow our companies and our exporters to do even more business with our European friends, and yet which achieves something that the people of this country instinctively knew was doable, but which they were told was impossible. We've taken back control of our laws and our destiny. We've taken back control of every jot and tittle of our regulation in a way that is complete and unfettered. From January the 1st, we are outside the customs union and outside the single market. British laws will be made solely by the British Parliament, interpreted by UK judges sitting in UK courts, and the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice will come to an end. We will be able to set our own standards, to innovate in the way that we want, to originate new frameworks for the sectors in which this country leads the world, from biosciences to financial services, artificial intelligence, and beyond. We'll be able to decide how and where We're going to stimulate new jobs and new hope with free ports, new green industrial zones. We'll be able to cherish our landscape and our environment in the way we choose, backing our farmers, backing British food and agricultural production. And for the first time since 1973, we will be an independent coastal state with full control of our waters, with the UK's share of fish in our waters rising substantially from roughly half today to closer to 2/3 in 5.5 years' time, after which there is no theoretical limit beyond those placed by science or conservation on the quantity of our own fish that we can fish in our waters. This agreement, this deal, above all means certainty. It means certainty for the aviation industry and the hauliers who have suffered so much in the COVID pandemic. It means certainty for the police, the border forces, the security services, all those we rely on across Europe to keep us all safe. It means certainty for our scientists who will be able to work together and continue to work together on great collective projects, because although we want in the UK to be a science superpower, we also want to be a collaborative science superpower. And above all, it means certainty for business, from financial services to our world-leading manufacturers, our car industry, certainty for all those who are working in high-skilled jobs and in firms and factories across the whole country. And so I say again, directly to our EU friends and partners, I think this deal means a new stability and a new certainty in what has sometimes been a fractious and difficult relationship. We will be your friend, your ally, your supporter, and indeed, never let it be forgotten, your number one market. Because although we have left the EU, this country will remain culturally, emotionally, historically, strategically, geologically attached to Europe.
So that's Boris Johnson there, talking at a moment undeniably good for him politically. This looks good, this sounds good, this is essentially what he wanted. This is what he wanted all along. This was the plan all along. They played the pundits for fools, right? Save a few. Your Laura Koonsbergs, your Robert Pestons, your Beth Rigby's before she was, removed unceremoniously and put on gardening leave. They all bought into, oh, it's a cliff edge, it's a knife edge, and they basically believed everything they were told by the briefers, and they just tweeted it out, and to the last minute, they were sucked into the delusion that a no deal was an outcome that may happen, when a good number of other people who were actually looking at it outside the Westminster bubble had concluded, no deal's not going to happen. And they kept ramping it up. They basically made the political soap opera work for Johnson. They played into his hands. How are the hardliners feeling about this? Your Nigel Farages, your Bill Cashers, etc., etc. Unclear, lukewarm at the moment. No one said this is a betrayal of true Brexit yet. I'm sure that is to come, but it's skinny enough as a deal to not upset too many of the hardliners yet. Bear with on that. We'll see how many vote against it when it comes back to the Commons. This is great PR for the government. It really is. It looks great. As I say, it sounds great. Whatever you and I think of this is a political win for Johnson. He's played the media like a fiddle. He's played the public like a fiddle. And now he gets to trumpet this about as a grand achievement when the reality is it is not. This is not a grand achievement. This was always the plan. This deal could have been done a month ago, right? Easily. No great concession or feat has occurred. This is just Johnson wrapping up something awful as something brilliant. It's not a good deal. James Meadway, progressive economist, says it's a woeful deal and there is no reason to support it. It is a pretty bad. Well, it is a woeful deal. Of course it is. What do you expect from Johnson? Now let's hear what Labour have to say. This is Keir Starmer speaking off the back of the deal being signed.
The choice facing Parliament, the choice facing Labour, is now whether to accept that deal or to reject it. The deal is a thin agreement. It does not provide adequate protections for British manufacturing, our financial services, creative industries, or workplace rights. It is not the deal that the government promised. Far from it. And there are serious questions about the government's preparedness for the new arrangements. As ever, leaving everything to the last minute has made it even more difficult for businesses to be ready. A better deal could have been negotiated. But I accept that that option has now gone. The chance for renegotiation is over. There are just two paths now left for our country: to move forward with a deal or without one. No deal is simply not an option at a moment of such national significance. It is just not credible for Labour to be on the sidelines. And that's why I can say today that when this deal comes before Parliament, Labour will accept it and vote for it. But let me be absolutely clear and say directly to the government, up against no deal, we accept this deal, but the consequences of it are yours, and yours alone.
Excellent. Exactly what I would have done. Exactly what I would have advised Keir Starmer to do. They're making the right move. You're not putting off Leave voters. Pretty much Middle England are at the point now of basically thinking, look, even if people voted Remain, they're not up in arms. They're not going to hold this against Labour at the next election, whereas Leave voters could well hold this against Labour at the next election if they delay this or were seen to try and block Brexit again, which was such a toxic image before. So good. There could be a shadow cabinet split. That would be very damaging. But what we heard there was Keir Starmer being serious, coming off the sidelines, making a decision, saying we'll back this. It sounded, dare I say, prime ministerial. And that's what we want to hear. We're heading in a better direction. Now let's just keep the internal factional fights down. Let's stop attacking the left, which has cooled down over the last few days, but the degree of expulsions has been obscene. There have been Jewish left-wing activists expelled. There have been old LGBTQ activists from days gone by expelled. Some really impressive individuals have been expelled from the Labour Party for, it's unclear, saying maybe Jeremy Corbyn's not that bad a dude. That's basically what they've done, and then they're out. Ridiculous. So let's stop that, please. Let's look to the country, because we've got a 4-point lead. Let's not let this go now, guys. Let's try and make this work. Now, so in terms of what Johnson has said, he said there would be change for firms, encouraging them to prepare. Exporters and logistics firms face new paperwork and checks as Britain will leave the single market and customs union. The UK had made concessions on fish, with a longer transition period preserving significant EU access to UK waters than initially demanded by the UK. Johnson said compromise isn't a dirty word. Both sides will be able to impose tariffs if the other is found to undercut them, with Johnson stressing the role of independent arbitration rather than the European Court of Justice. The UK has not secured everything it wanted on financial services equivalents, which would have helped maintain better EU access for the UK finance sector. The move would preserve cross-border ties and access for hauliers, car makers, police, scientists and highly skilled workers. The EU say the deal is fair. As I say, this was always the plan. It is not the end point of our relationship with the EU. It is inevitably going to be a thicker deal will have to be negotiated either by the Tory government or by a future Labour government. The nightmarish scenario of rejoin is a very realistic possibility in the next decade or so. We'll see. I would oppose rejoining the European Union. I think now we're out, what the left has to do is make the case. Look, we've split in a way we wouldn't have wanted to split, ideally, but now we're out. there is the freedom to do lots of things, to have a radical overhaul of the economy, we have to make the case for that radical overhaul of the economy genuinely taking advantage of all the things that leaving the EU will allow us to do, while showing up Johnson's approach to Brexit for the deregulatory sham that it is, and how it will not match up even close with what was promised in the 2016 referendum by the camp Johnson campaigned with. Michel Barnier says the clock is no longer ticking. Today is a day of relief, but tinged by some sadness as we compare what came before with what lies ahead. Obviously not pleased we're going. That's to be expected. Obviously they didn't want us to go. The EU is not going to be brought down by the UK leaving, but this is a severe blow to the European project in many ways. Now, over to US politics. Donald Trump has done a flurry of pardons. So he's pardoned his ex-campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and he's pardoned Charles Kushner, the father of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, obviously. So I'll just read this to you. President Donald Trump on Wednesday pardoned former campaign chairman Paul Manafort and Charles Kushner, the father of his son-in-law, in the latest wave of clemency to benefit longtime associates and supporters. The actions in Mr. Trump's final weeks at the White House bring to nearly 50 the number of people whom the president in the last 2 days has granted clemency. Pardons are common in the final stretch of a president's tenure, but Mr. Trump has proven himself determined to use his clemency power not only to reward his allies, but to support the causes of convicts championed by his friends. So Manafort and Roger Stone have been pardoned months earlier. Roger Stone had his sentence commuted by Trump, underscore the president's desire to chip away at the results of special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation and to come to the aid of associates he feels were wrongly pursued. Now, the way we look at this, the way we should look at this, is that this power shouldn't be a thing, okay? It's been abused plenty. It's been abused in part by Obama. It's definitely abused by Bill Clinton. The thing is not being used as a socially just device. The President of the United States shouldn't have the unilateral right to pardon. This should be reformed, it should be completely overhauled, it should be changed. That's what needs to happen. This is a broader point. This isn't just about what Trump's doing. Let's make it a broader discussion, because presidents come and go and many are corrupt, but not in the obvious way that Donald Trump is corrupt. So let's deal with it overall instead of just going orange man bad. Let's get the core of the issue. In other news in the US, the suspected Russian hack of the UK government. So, this is from CNN. We've long known about Russian efforts to compromise the US government and infiltrate the 2020 election process. While there's no evidence to suggest Russia was successful in its efforts to target US election systems, it's now suspected of hacking multiple US government agencies, from the Department of Homeland Security to the Department of Commerce, by accessing SolarWinds, a third-party security vendor. It's also possible the Treasury Department and the US Postal Service were hacked. Let's summarise this very quickly, my views on this. And something a lot of people on the left would broadly agree with. The confected outrage on this is OTT. Trump has been right in the sense that he has pushed back against the obsessive Russia hawkery, but instead of moving in a progressive direction from there, obviously being Trump, he's just turned it into an opportunity to move to China hawkery and demagogue about China, even though there's literally no evidence. Less evidence it was Russia, less evidence than there is that it was Russia, that China had anything to do with this. He's just made it about China. Oh, China must have done it, which is just ridiculous. The hawkery from people like Biden and the Republican and Democratic establishments is very worrying, because it shows an appetite to head towards a much more sinister escalation of tensions with Russia, when the reality is America are the biggest hackers. They're the biggest saboteurs. This whole thing is not, people are talking like, this is an attack from Russia. No. I'm no apologist for the authoritarian conservatism of the Russian government, but I believe in fairness, and I'm saying right here, this is not something to go insane about. The American government basically secured the... At one point, they had the opportunity to turn off all the lights in Moscow. I think that's what it was. You know, this is not just, oh, Russia, stop bullying us. So, give me a break. This is just an opportunity to escalate tensions. Fueled, of course, by the military-industrial complex. Of course it is. Of course that's what's going on. And, yeah, that's just about where we are. Joe Biden has had a U-turn on immigration, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is extremely distressing, but we will be talking about that. First, I want to quickly talk to you about what cowards the Republican Party really are. There's a clear break happening with Donald Trump, between Trump and the Republicans, because if we look at this, so House Republicans defied President Donald Trump's wishes on Christmas Eve, blocking the passage of a proposal to include $2,000 stimulus checks, something he demanded in an angry video posted to Twitter on Tuesday night while threatening to upend months of negotiation over government funding and COVID relief. Nancy Pelosi dared Republicans to object to Trump's call for a bigger direct payment, something Democrats have been arguing in favour of for months by putting up a clean bill for 2,000 stimulus checks on the House floor while most lawmakers weren't in town and trying to pass it via unanimous consent. Republican Representative Rob Whitman rejected the unanimous consent attempt, as Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said Republicans would do. McCarthy called on Pelosi to reopen negotiations on government spending and the COVID relief bill. Pelosi has scheduled another round of votes for Monday, December the 28th, when lawmakers are expected to come back to town. So, everyone's acting like idiots. Trump's said something that we should all be able to agree with, and Republicans are, first of all, this is quite substantial, they're starting to do something he doesn't want them to do. That's new. But at the same time, you know, these cowards are reverting to deficit hawkery because they know the writing's on the wall for their dear President Trump. Now let's have a quick listen to President Trump talking about this before it happened.
Production technology, $2 million to research the impact of downed trees, $566 million for construction projects at the FBI. The bill also allows stimulus checks for the family members of illegal aliens, allowing them to get up to $1,800 each. This is far more than the Americans are given. Despite all of this wasteful spending and much more, the $900 billion package provides hardworking taxpayers with only $600 each in relief payments. And not enough money is given to small businesses, and in particular restaurants, whose owners have suffered so grievously. They were only given a deduction for others to use in business their restaurant for 2 years. This 2-year period must be withdrawn, which will allow the owners to obtain financing and get their restaurants back in condition. Congress can terminate it at a much later date, but 2 years is not acceptable. It's not enough. Congress found plenty of money for foreign countries, lobbyists, and special interests, while sending the bare minimum to the American people who need it. It wasn't their fault. It was China's fault, not their fault. I am asking Congress to amend this bill and increase the ridiculously low $600 to $2,000, or $4,000 for a couple. I am also asking Congress to immediately get rid of the wasteful and unnecessary items from this legislation and to send me a suitable bill, or else the next administration will have to deliver a COVID relief package, and maybe that administration will be me, and we will get it done. Thank you very much.
Slight wanderance into delusion there. Pretty much just let's pit all these different groups of people against each other, all the America First stuff. Yeah, standard from Trump. Unhinged, but on the 2,000 stimulus checks, again, who can disagree? Let's talk about Joe Biden, shall we? It's time to talk about Joe Biden, guys. Do you remember, on the first day of my administration, we will take immediate action to undo the horrific immigration and detention policy of the Trump administration? And do you remember that through the Trump years, it was, oh my God, you've got to back Biden. You've got to vote Biden to get rid of Trump because kids are in cages. Well, people now don't care because Joe Biden's in office. So all these brunch liberals who pretended that they had any shred of principle, now Joe Biden's in office, do not care. They're now defending the Obama administration making these cages in the first place. Okay? This is new news. Biden will not immediately roll back Trump immigration and border restrictions. Susan Rice and Jake Sullivan tell Spanish news agency EFE, and Title 42, MPP, etc. will take time to undo, despite campaign promises for day one reversals. Biden team clearly worried about new border surge, saying migrants and asylum seekers absolutely should not believe those in the region peddling the idea that the border will suddenly be fully open to process everyone on day one. It will not. So not only are we looking more in depth at this, we're starting to head in towards anti-immigrant, like, oh God, the borders are going to flood sort of rhetoric. But we're also turning back on our promise. We're going to see a long, drawn-out process which will end with some sort of horrific, toxic bargain with the GOP that will shaft the most vulnerable people yet again. Who's surprised? I'm not. Liberals are in denial. You know, this is why there's a difference between nominating someone like Bernie Sanders and nominating someone like Joe Biden. He's not even reversing the Trump-era stuff, right? We're not even going back to Obama-level cruelty. Absolutely ridiculous and shameful. I mean, what do you expect from a septuagenarian rapist who spent the last, 40 years trying to impose policies that are regressive and conservative upon the American people? What do you expect? Ludicrous, ludicrous, ludicrous. Makes Obama look like a picnic. There's a very big contrast in Christmas messaging between the two leaders. Just have a very quick listen to Joe Biden's Christmas message.
Before I take questions, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. This has been one of the toughest years we've ever faced as a nation. And the pandemic, the economic crisis, calls for racial justice, historic and punishing wildfires and storms. So this season of reflection carries a much deeper meaning than it usually does. Over 320,000 lives lost to this virus. And Jill and I send our prayers, as I'm sure all of you do, to all who are facing this dark winter with an empty seat at the dinner table where a loved one used to sit and talk and laugh and reminisce. Our hearts go out to all of you who have fallen on hard times, through no fault of your own, I might add. Unable to sleep at night, weighed down with the worry of what tomorrow will bring for you and for your family.
Now, there's a big contrast, and you notice it most, including with Boris Johnson, that Joe Biden's rhetoric is, the worst is not yet behind us. That's very realistic, and it's very grounded in reality, and you're not used to that when we've had the bombast of Trump and Johnson. So hearing someone, say something that sounds real, it's a little bit refreshing, isn't it? And I don't like that that's the case, but it is. It is a nice improvement in that sense. Now, polling. Labour have taken a poll lead. If you look at YouGov, December 15th, 16th, Tories 39%, Labour 38%. December 21st to 22nd, just off the back of this U-turn on Christmas. 37% Tories, 41% Labour. Look at that jump. That is a big result for Labour. And look at, this is their highest rating of the pandemic so far. Reaching up there. And it's probably nearly one of the lowest points for the Tories in the pandemic. Not quite, but nearly. So good news for Keir Starmer, good news for Labour. Just as it looked like it was all falling apart, we see a 4-point lead. The backlash against the government that I anticipated has happened. Labour must now work to cultivate this. It can be sustained, right? But what they have to do is they have to not scare this off, right? You've got to let it grow. Let this become the norm instead of a one-off when something awful happens. And as I say, we've got to stop the internal fighting. We've got to stop the factional manoeuvring by Keir Starmer. We've got to stop the intra-party nonsense and focus on the country. As I say, this can be sustained. We can keep this going. It can become the norm, and we can make it so that Labour is leading even when there's good news for the government, because it's set in, the Black Wednesday judgment. We can make this the Black Wednesday moment, but we can only do that if we have the official opposition being sensible. We're seeing some strands of that now. We need to keep heading in that direction. This can slip away. There's the Brexit deal. There's going to be vaccinations. There's going to be the rally around the flag effect when the COVID crisis hits again. This, in the midst of wins and rallying behind the government, this may slip away and it may all be history by this time next year. But it doesn't have to be. It can be sustained. This is great. This is a great result for Labour. It's a great result for Keir Starmer. If this was reflected, if an election was held the day after Christmas was cancelled, Labour would be the largest party in Parliament. Now that's big. That's very big. Especially off the back of the drubbing they had. Going in the next election to being the largest party in Parliament would be a huge achievement. The tables have turned on the government, but the norm is still, they're within a few points of each other. Even though this is a moderate lead, it may shrink away. We have to get Labour to break away from the gridlock, so it's not, Tories leading for a bit, Labour leading for a bit. I want a clear, decisive break where one party is leading consistently, and we can make that Labour. But the Tories are still odds on to win the next election, no doubt about it. There is a mountain to climb. But this is the very first step up that mountain. And it is, by all accounts, absolutely welcome. It's 7:31. Thank you for joining me today on MesmePolitics. I'm Toby Lepati Mesme. And we're with you every single day, including Christmas Day, by the way, 7 o'clock, Greenwich Mean Time, in the evenings for half an hour, bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. We like to at least try to offer a unique perspective, unique analysis on things. And I will always tell you what I really think. Even if it's unpopular, even if it's a bit out there, I will tell you what I really think. And I hope you'll do the same by getting in touch in the chat. And no matter how controversial, sharing your opinions. Because that's what this is all about. It's, think of it as a digital think tank for the left. We just want to splurge out thoughts and ideas and see what we can do. See what new perspectives can flourish. Good show today. Lots to get through. I don't know how busy Christmas Day will be. Knowing politics, there will probably be plenty of things that have happened, or at least a few things that have happened. I know it's been a hugely difficult year for a lot of people. I want to thank everyone who's been working in the NHS and in healthcare around the world, but especially our wonderful NHS workers. I want to thank everyone who's got us through to this point in the pandemic in one piece, right? Not the government, the people who've been sweeping the streets, the people who have been saving our relatives' lives. This is... I know a lot of people are going to be alone this Christmas. And I want you to know that you can still make the best of it, but also alongside that, even if not, it is just a day. The spring will come. That's the important thing, is the spring will come. This will not be forever. You will be eliminated. And if necessary, just ring someone. Do something, right? Any form of communication, because no one should spend Christmas alone. Lots of people are, more than ever this year, so you're not alone if you are. And I hope you'll join us tomorrow in the evening on the show and just have some nice food and watch a film. If you're having smaller celebrations than you thought you would, again, make the best of it. We can still have a brilliant, brilliant Christmas. It's just not going to be in the ideal way for many of us up and down the country, particularly if we're in tier 4. But in other cases, just full stop, because COVID. Different people's situations differ. Right, that's it from me. We are back tomorrow for Friday's show for Christmas Day, the Christmas Day edition. I've been Toby Lepati Mesme. This has been MesmePolitics. I'll see you very soon.